My name is Kenneth. I take photos while my construction crew is working on the job site. I also shoot footage and post it on their main channel. The reason I'm making content like this is because I'm currently certified in advanced videography, and as my knowledge keeps growing, the channel is going to keep growing with it. I work every single week, which means I'm constantly creating, constantly learning, and constantly testing new ways to make better videos and better photos. So if you follow this channel, you're going to see a lot of different types of content, a lot of different creative approaches, and a lot of real-world experience that I believe will bring insane value to you. Today's journal topic is the #1 lens for portrait photographers in Micro Four Thirds. Now, before I begin, I do want to say this. I'm not here to talk about which lens is the sharpest edge to edge. I'm not here to talk about charts, lab tests, or things like that. For me, I just need a lens that makes photos look good. So I really do not care that much if a lens is the sharpest lens ever made. What I care about is whether it gives me the kind of background blur, compression, and overall look that I'm trying to create. The lens I'm about to talk about is the one that changed the way I look at Micro Four Thirds portrait photography. I hope more people start buying it before it becomes even harder to find, because this lens was discontinued a while ago. Chapter 1. When I first got into Micro Four Thirds, I kept thinking about whether I should go with zoom lenses or prime lenses. At that time, the Leica 10-25 1.7 was extremely expensive, but it was the most popular. And even though it was a beautiful lens, it just was not the right move for me at that stage. So instead, I decided to go with the Sigma prime lenses. I bought the 16 1.4 first, then I bought the 56mm 1.4, and I finally bought the 30mm 1.4. After using all three for a long time, I learned very quickly which one stood out the most. And for portrait photography, the Sigma 56 1.4 was the best one. The reason is because on Micro Four Thirds, the lens gives you a look that feels very special. At 1.4, you get a really nice amount of subject separation, and because 56mm on Micro Four Thirds gives you an equivalent field of view close to 112, it creates a kind of compression that I personally love. That focal length is not something people talk about all the time, but once you use it, you understand why it works so well. It compresses the background beautifully. And when that background starts to melt away behind your subject, the photo instantly starts to feel more professional. And that was a very important lesson for me, because part of my job is not about creating photos for Havenwood Construction. Part of my job is also paying attention to how other companies present themselves visually. I look at competitors, I look at Google Images, and I look at their website photos. And when you compare smartphone pictures to images taken on a Micro Four Thirds camera with the Sigma 56mm, they are two completely different types of photos. You can immediately tell which one feels professional. And when you are building a portfolio, that matters a lot, especially in the beginning. Because when you are first starting out, nobody really knows who you are. Nobody really knows your talent yet. Nobody knows how serious you are. But a lens like this can make your work look strong enough that people begin to trust your eye very quickly. It makes people think, yeah, this guy knows how to take photos. Chapter 2. Now, when it comes to actually using this lens, there are some things you need to understand. This focal length is tight, and because it opens up to 1.4, a lot of light comes in. I shoot outdoors during the daytime on construction job sites, And most of the time, the sunlight is directly above the subjects. That creates harsh top-down light. It creates raccoon eyes, and it makes people look less flattering. So over time, I learned a few techniques that really helped me. One of the biggest ones is this. I almost always try to shoot from the shadow side of the subject. Because this lens is already tight and already compressing the background, I do not have to stress as much about every single detail behind them when shooting wide open. Now, a little bit of more information about this is that in construction, there's sometimes people not following safety standards. Imagine you're focusing on a subject and right behind them is someone not following safety standards. So getting that compressed background blur would also help you from actually not having your shot ruined because someone is doing something they shouldn't be doing. So what I focus on instead is the direction of light, which is really, really important. If the sun is hitting them from the right side, I usually move myself toward the left side. I try to position myself somewhere around 30 to 45 degrees off center of my subject. I usually do not want to stand directly in front of the subject because when I do that, the photo starts to look flatter. It loses some of that depth. But when I position myself on the shadow side, the photo gains contrast, it gains shape. It also gains that three-dimensional feeling that makes a portrait look stronger. Sometimes I always tell the subject to tilt their head a little bit to the left or to the right. Not too much, just enough to make the light fall better on their face. Even though the sun is above them, I could still make it look more directional. That technique alone made a huge difference in my portraits. Chapter 3. Another thing that changed my results was learning how to color grade with intention. Most of my photos I take are corporate style images for a construction company. So the color grading cannot be random. It has to be consistent. At first, I thought I wanted everything to be very vibrant and highly saturated. But over time, I realized that was not the right approach for the kind of clients I'm trying to attract. When people are looking at a company, especially in construction, they usually want the visuals to feel stable, polished, and professional. I started pulling the saturation back a little, not to the point where the image feels dead, but enough that the photos feel controlled. If you look at the way I grade a lot of my portraits, they're not streaming with color. They are usually a little more restrained, a little more desaturated, but they still pop. And that kind of look feels much more professional to me. I also started paying attention to the best companies in the construction space. A lot of them either have weak phone photos or inconsistent images that do not really match. But when I shoot with the Sigma 56mm and then color grade my images consistently, it creates a very specific look. And that look becomes a style. And that style becomes part of the value. So if you're trying to get freelance work or if you're trying to build your brand, one of the best things you can do is show your strongest images and keep your color grading consistent. Because companies are not just hiring you for a camera, they're hiring you for your eye. They are hiring you for your taste. They are hiring you for the way your work makes them look. And I can say that from real experience. The companies I work for loves this look. And not only that, it also opened the door for me to do the kind of work for construction companies as well. There are businesses out there that are willing to invest in better website photos, better Google images, and better visual presentation overall. Chapter 4. One thing I learned from using Micro Four Thirds is that even though people always talk about what it lacks, those limitations can actually make you better. Yes, Micro Four Thirds does not give you the same dynamic range as some larger sensor cameras. Yes, it also does not give you the same kind of effortless background blur. But instead of letting that discourage me, I started noticing something. It made me more intentional. It made me pay more attention to composition. It made me care more about the environment around the subject. And over time, that made me a better photographer and better videographer. So I do not think Micro Four Thirds is something people should dismiss. I still think it's one of the best systems for creators, YouTubers, and people who do both photo and video. Now, yes, if you are trying to go into a very high-end professional direction, full frame absolutely makes sense. I understand that. But I also think a lot of people watching this are probably in a hybrid position. Maybe you have a YouTube channel, maybe you talk about your work, maybe you also offer a service through photography or videography. And if that sounds like you, then I honestly think Micro Four Thirds gives you one of the best balances out there. Full frame gives you amazing image quality, but it also gives you bigger bodies, bigger lenses, and more weight. For me personally, that is not what I want to carry all the time. I want to have fun using my gear. I want to enjoy the process. And Micro Four Thirds gives me that with cameras like the GH7 and the G9 Mark II. Yes, there are challenges. People are going to talk about dynamic range. They are going to talk about background blur. And honestly, those are the two biggest things people bring up. Maybe you can also argue that the system needs more fast zoom lenses. I agree with that. But I also believe those limitations can sharpen your skills, because if you have less background blur, then more of that environment stays visible. And if more of that environment stays visible, then you have to pay attention. You have to care about what is behind your subject. You have to care about the trees, the buildings, the tools, the workers, the sunlight, and the direction of the shot. And I noticed that when I started doing that, my work got better. I stopped only looking at the subject. I started paying attention to the whole frame. That changed everything for me. Even with video, I started thinking more about where I wanted to move, where I wanted to position the camera, how I wanted the sun to hit the scene, how I wanted the environment to support the story. And that is something I do not hear enough people talk about. Also, just because a lens opens up at 1.4 does not mean you always need to shoot at 1.4. Even in Hollywood, cinematographers are not always shooting wide open. Sometimes they're at 2.8, sometimes they're at 3.5, sometimes they're at f4. It depends on the shot. So having a fast lens is amazing, but knowing when to stop down is also part of becoming a better creator. Chapter 5. Now, after using the Sigma 56 for such a long time, there is one thing I do wish Micro Four Thirds had more of, and that is fast zoom lenses. Because while primes are excellent for photography, videography is different for me. I work in construction environments. It gets dusty, it gets dirty, and I do not always have the luxury of switching lenses over and over again. I do not want to keep exposing my camera to dust every time I need a different focal length, and I do not want to miss moments because I'm too busy swapping lenses. So while I respect primes, I think it's very important, especially for photography. I really wish the system had more fast zoom options. Something like the 10 to 25, right? Or maybe a 12 to 35, but even faster. Something closer to 1.4 if that were possible. I would absolutely pay extra money for that, because that kind of range and flexibility will make a huge difference for people like me who shoot real world jobs every week. Chapter 6. So here's the big takeaway. If you're willing to invest in Micro Four Thirds without letting all that negativity online get to you, I think a few things are going to happen. First, you're probably going to have a better experience using all the features these cameras offer. Second, you are probably going to save money. But most importantly than all of that, I think you're going to become a better storyteller. And the reason I say that is because storytelling is about emotion. It is about making people feel something. That can happen through visuals. That could happen through sound. That could happen through narration. But as a videographer, your job is to create feeling. And that is one of the hardest jobs to do. And I think when you use Micro Four Thirds, you start thinking more intentionally about your visuals. You stop obsessing over things like, wow, this is so sharp, or wow, this has insane dynamic range, or wow, I could push my ISO super far because I spent thousands of dollars on a camera. And look, I get it, man. I love good gear too, but I also think Micro Four Thirds forces you to care more about what really matters. The frame, the composition, the moment, the story. And because of that, I really do believe it can make you a more intentional creator. And honestly, I think it is time for Micro Four Thirds users to start making YouTube channels and start sharing their real experiences with the system. Whether you shoot wildlife, macro, travel, portraits, or video, there's a lot to talk about with this system. And I think that conversation needs to come back. To me, this is one of the best camera systems to invest in if you want to have fun and still create serious work. There really isn't not enough system that gives you this kind of balance unless you go even smaller with 1-inch sensor cameras or action cameras. And when you really think about it, just think about it for a second. The smaller sensor can actually push you to become more creative, right? POV shots, right, etc., etc. And that is what makes it interesting, right? Think about it. Drones, right? So I'm just letting you think about it for a second. As always, I wish you well. See you next time, and farewell. Oh my gosh, I'm like sweating like crazy right now. Oh, I forgot to